I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing News Network, and here today with me is Chris Marcus, founder of Arcadia Economics. Thank you so much for being here online with me today to discuss what's going on in silver right now.
Hi, Charlotte. Great to see you again, as always, and thanks so much for having me. Certainly a very interesting time in the market, and glad it ended up the day we have a call today, so ready to dig in.
Certainly very interesting. So I actually want to start with, before we were doing this interview, you sent me a clip from the movie The Big Short, and you said, watch this. This is where we're at right now in the silver story. So to start out, I wondered if you could tell me what's happening in that clip. Maybe we'll link it below so people could watch it themselves, and what parallels you're seeing between what's happening there and what's happening right now.
Yeah, well, I always felt The Big Short was a great, parallel for this. It's why I named my book The Big Silver Short, because you had some economic conditions that have been building for years, decades, that fundamentally are clear, but it's a psychological thing. And some people can't sit and wait 30 years to be right. You saw in The Big Short how it required a lot of patience. And I would suggest in today's environment and culture, you look at how Wall Street is, they chase momentum, but that runs out. And the things that I am seeing now, and I want to be careful because I don't want to scare people, but from what I am seeing, it seems like a rapidly increasing probability that something like the end there where it has broken, and we can discuss the specific data points, but it feels to me like something has broken or is breaking because there's a run on metals. I asked my partner we have a relationship with Miles Franklin. So when people say, hey, where's a safe place to buy metals? So my partner handles that. She's been getting the calls and the emails. They don't care about the premiums. These are her words from her response. They don't care about the premiums. They just want product. And I mentioned before we started, the owner of Miles Franklin on Monday, we did an interview. He showed me his notebook, like 4 or 5 pages each side. So like 8 or 10, if you count both sides, name, phone number. He said, these are the people I'm supposed to call back tonight. And then based on the SLV figures from yesterday, if we can discuss how record setting the amount of metal they bought on Friday was, which was a historical record. Even going back as long as there were silver trusts. It was slightly less on Monday, and then it doubled that yesterday. Last night, the U.S. Mint said they are unable to meet the surge of demand for gold and silver, so now we're seeing it filter over. Today, we saw the owner of JM Bullion on the front of CNBC, not just an article, a video too. And I'm guessing that most of the people watching this right now thought they'd see aliens landing before they saw that. We saw silver manipulation stories on Wall Street Journal and CNBC. I didn't think that I would ever see that. I've talked with someone from CNBC that I have a nice relationship with, they've had the book for a year. And so, they've known to see these things happening. Again, we can dig into any of those individual signs. And I really want to be careful of how I'm phrasing things today because I don't want to scare people, but having traded equity options throughout 2007 and 2008, then studying gold and silver ever since then, there have been a lot of times where it felt like things were building, but there are a lot of signs emerging that something is happening now. And I say this as calmly as possible. If there were any decisions for anyone who's said before, yeah, well, let me know when it's closer. I think if there are decisions people are going to make, I would suggest considering doing them now.
Okay, so we do have a lot to unpack from everything you've said there. Where I want to start, I think, is I'm picking out from what you've said 2 different things going on. There's the demand for physical silver, which is very strong, and there's the SLV inflows, also very strong. And I think that people may not necessarily understand how those relate to each other, what the differences are. So maybe we can dig into that a little bit.
Sure. I know you've been reading The Big Silver Short, and you may have noticed that I asked several of the top silver analysts I could find in the world for each ounce of silver, how many different paper claims are on it. And I don't think there was one that gave a number of less than 500 to 1, right? So essentially, you've had this setup for decades that you have the Achilles of the ending of It's a Wonderful Life, where people, if they all show up at the same time and want their thing and it's sold to 500 different people, that's the end. It appears as if we are incredibly close to that point. Again, I know there's been a lot of wild things that happen, and we've felt it's close before. We got a taste of it last summer when silver shot up $11 in a month. But perhaps to indicate why is that you have a fractional reserve system. And especially when the price of silver was lower, it killed the interest. Nobody cared about silver. And I get it. People want to make money. So if tech stocks are, rallying, then the psychology is what it is. I think we've talked before about this exact point where but watch out. Once silver starts going over, once it moves, if you ever when you see silver, if you see it at $50, then all of a sudden it's on CNBC. Well, we didn't have to get to 50. Whatever the motives or influences behind WallStreetBets or Reddit, which would be another day, a fascinating topic to dig into, silver manipulation is now gone viral. We've had exponents of the viewers on our channel. I mean, it's on Twitter. SilverSqueeze is a hashtag, which, perhaps is anecdotal and not really all that important, because what it comes down to, and what a lot of people are discussing, is the process of pressuring the system, similar to how there was a way that some traders pressured GameStop and AMC. The way that people are pressuring the silver market right now is by taking physical. So for decades, Charlotte, you've heard me, you've heard 8 million other people go on and on. Yeah, well, one day, the signs are emerging that day has arrived. And let me put that in perspective, if I may. I mentioned I have a relationship with Miles Franklin, and I asked this after Friday was wild, then the weekend got really wild because you can buy metals on the weekend. And on Monday, it was to the extent that I wanted to get an accurate quote, not just to put things in proper perspective. I said, I sent her an email saying, would you say this is far and away the most business you've ever done in the 30 years of the company? And she responded, it's like toilet paper after Corona in 2020. And that was Monday. Yesterday was bigger, but let me, to put the SLV additions in proper perspective, I want to show you a chart because I'm going to be careful of how I phrase this. I mean, I'm an analyst, not a lawyer. I am not a personal financial advisor, so this is not financial advice. I'm just sharing my best, genuine, honest research, and you can take this as you will. But as someone who has looked at the silver market for a decade, and I've spent years studying and thinking about in Enron or Bernie Madoff, what do you think? What did it look like the day before it collapsed? What did it look like the week before it collapsed? Because if you were there looking and if you knew where to look, it was probably obvious, just like it was in The Big Short, right? So day one of SilverSqueeze, let's call it Friday. So on day one, Friday, I fell out of my chair when Friday night they reported how much metal was allegedly added into SLV. They said 34 million ounces. To put that in perspective, here's the last update from the Silver Institute. If you look at 2020 here, this was the expected based on their forecast. You see each year, mine supply was a little lower last year, about 1 billion ounces, right? That 1,000 is 1,000 million, so it's about 1 billion. Can you see that? Then here you have Now you could say even 34 million out of 1,000. Well, you do that for 30 days, you've eaten the entire global supply in a month based on the rate. And that doesn't even include the physical buying, but just what went into SLV. We'll leave that aside. What hit me of a better way to put it in perspective after I slept on that one for a night. Here's industrial, photography, jewelry, silverware. It's all the uses for silver. Now, unless we're going to stop using computers and electronics and build cars and solar panels, these numbers aren't, you can see they stay pretty constant. I'll leave it up here. People can see that. So this is accounted for. That's about 700 million. So that's 7 out of 10. Then here, net physical investment. That's when people buy physical metal from the bullion shops. That's 236 million last year. And based on the fact that now silver is selling like toilet paper after Corona, I would challenge anyone to find a bullion dealer who would go on record and say they see any way this number is coming down this year. So that means 93% of the entire supply is already accounted for. That brings us to 931 million ounces, and there were 962 of supply. Yet last year, here we have net investments in ETPs, 350 million. ETP is exchange traded product, which is SLV and the other silver trusts. Everything clear so far? I know I'm moving quickly, but good to go? Okay. So you could say last year, which was a record year, 350 million ounces were added, certainly a lot, I would agree. So that would even be 10% of what you put in there last year in the first day of SilverSqueeze. Just wait till we get to days 2 and 3. Make sure you're sitting. I don't want... But really the way I would look at this, if 318 of these were a deficit, which we don't, no one I know can figure out where it came from. So that really means what was, if 962 was a supply, 931 was accounted for, what was actually available to the Silver Trust last year was the difference, 31 million, this. They ran a deficit. They put that on the credit card. That wasn't, so assuming these numbers of supply and industrial demand stay the same, and certainly if I was an industrial user and I was watching this now, I wonder if it's interesting to think what an industrial user like Apple or Samsung must be doing. Hopefully they're watching your channel, Charlotte. So 34 is bigger than 31. So in one day, whether it was SilverSqueeze or whoever, net investors took the entire supply in the first day of SilverSqueeze. And let me stop there. Is there anything I can clear up? Just, I know this is, I want to make sure it's clear for folks.
Yeah, I think this is great, and it really helps to have the chart and the numbers up there. I feel like probably the thing that people are wondering, because I've seen them on Twitter and elsewhere talking about this, is, these very high levels of demand, and yet the price remains. Before this interview, I checked, it was just under $27 after going up to around 30 earlier in this busy time. I'm sure you're getting there, but maybe we can touch on what's going on.
Oh, we can definitely talk about why there's some very unusual activity at this particular time. But that the fact that on the first day of SilverSqueeze, which was Friday, that they ate the annual entire pie in one day, you didn't even hear the big part yet. Because on Monday, another 20 million ounces were added. And then, Charlotte, we're recording on Wednesday. What would be your guess of what happened? So remember, silver went up on Monday, and we've seen there was a lot of attention, a lot of buying. So after SilverSqueeze became a thing, when it goes up, they bought 34 million, which was, well, I'll show you how that's a record. And then 20 million, which would have been a record if there weren't 34 million. That's what happened when it goes up. So when the price went down, would you like to take a guess what happened yesterday?
Do we break the record again?
61 million shares into 61 million shares, which are supposedly ounces being added, which I wouldn't put my money anywhere near. And I have former professional auditors, hedge fund managers who I've been begging to explain to me if they can come up with a scenario in which that there's not something off. I'm putting it lightly. You can imagine what I would like to say if there were no legal restrictions. Plus, in addition to SLV, the total for all of the trusts, let's pull up this one. It's quite stunning, and people should see it for themselves. Give me a second to back that out. So here's a graph showing all of the trusts. So let me start with the daily on the 3-month. This is the last 3 days. So there's 35, there's 20, here's, okay, it's 57, let's call it. To put that in perspective, so this is over the last 3 months. Here's over the last 6 months. Still, this is Friday, this first of these 3 here, okay? So you can see Friday, still record over that 6 months. Save some time, we'll go out 2 years. You can see 35 is right up here. So the first Friday was 35. You can look, here's 2 years out, 5 years out. 35 is right here. So during Corona, you had one bigger. But then 5 years, you see what I'm getting at. 35 was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters, enormous. And then you have, see, here's the total, which probably includes a lot of Sprott, PSLV, which personally, when people are asking me, I would feel most comfortable with physical. I would feel comfortable with PSLV. I'm not personally invested, so again, do your own research. I have auditors, professional, they can't explain to me how this is, there's not smoke on the fire, or it's not burning down now. We have imperfect information, but it's like if you're standing and there's a building in the way, but you can't see what's going on, but you see people running and screaming. Maybe they're acting, but so that's why this is, I don't know anyone, and Charlotte, I think you've seen the show, we've talked before. I don't know anyone who believes that it's possible for that amount of metal to be added. And I might add, it hit me last night. The only way that we know if there's anything in there is based on the word of JP Morgan, who is the custodian of SLV, who just got fined $1 billion for manipulating, these are the words of the Department of Justice, the precious metals and treasury market, I might add, hundreds of thousands of times. This occurred during the period, they said as far back as 8 years, which overlaps with the CFTC's investigation into silver manipulation when they said they found nothing. Yet despite, as you know, and we've talked about before, Bart Chilton on the record laid out more than clearly. He went out of his way to explain for folks just how rigged that was. And then 10 years, a couple of years later, the Department of Justice finds hundreds of thousands of occasions. And all the signs are that this is escalating by the hour. The mint is shut down. Dealers are blown out. SLV numbers are, auditors cannot, I'm trying to pay someone to tell me, don't even give me a plausible scenario. I'm asking intelligent people, give me a far-fetched scenario of any other thing that you can see. It feels to me as if something is breaking now.
Okay, definitely it is a quickly developing situation, and I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you're so busy. But, as we wrap up, maybe you can give people an idea of where to find you if they want to learn more. And maybe you just quickly, what do the next couple of days look like?
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on your other question about the bizarre price action because
right.
I think a lot of people are confused, understandably so. And that's why making videos at the yin yang, tweeting is and like really, but I would suggest to folks, instead of emailing me, please just check I'm putting these things and writing it as clearly as possible. I'm taking extra time to do it right. So if people want to forward it, I can't respond to everyone. It's just impossible right now. But thank you again for letting me share this to your audience, because I think it's important. So February 1st. So that's, let's actually take this back one day so you can see what happened over the weekend. So you remember silver moved about $1 or so, maybe a little less, on both Thursday and Friday. And then over the weekend, Charlotte, would you say that you heard a lot more chatter about silver manipulation than ever before in your life, right?
100% from people who usually don't care at all about it.
I usually get about, we used to get about, we did a show each night and be somewhere between 5,000 or 15,000 people. Over the weekend, we were getting 60, 70,000 people. So clearly as one metric of interest. So by the time the markets open Sunday night, people are talking about buying silver. They're actually buying it from the bullion dealers. And here's Sunday night, but we saw late Friday after the close that they had already eaten the entire SLV supply in a day. So shoots up understandably, which would make sense when there's a panic. When people are buying something to the extent they don't care about the price, they just want it. Shoots up, comes down, then Monday, exciting rally, everything's up here, silver. The futures got above 30. And certainly if you're a bank that shorts the silver market and is heavily exposed, just like we heard, there were funds blowing out on that GameStop move. This is when banks get margin calls, go bankrupt. So here you have it trading up, which I think given the conditions would make sense. Then it's interesting because here it sells off a little bit. And then here's the close on Monday. Let's call it 28.50, right? We did a call on Sunday night. And I said, what do I expect? I said, it's exciting that it's up, but be prepared. It's, the bad guy always has the final scene where he throws the kitchen sink. We don't know what happened. There's wild buying. Any rational supply and demand would shoot it higher, much higher. But we know you can sell as much paper as you want. Actually, let's show this chart instead. I don't have that pulled up at the moment, but if you saw the chart with the volume, where you can see volume hammered on all exactly at the times it plummets. So between Monday and Tuesday night, silver is at 28.50. And then here in the middle of Tuesday night, let's call it, here's 4 a.m. So somebody's selling, and it's clearly not the people who are buying physical. We know that. It's not the people who are buying SLV. And there was even perhaps the sign that something is happening is that, there's even, I don't have my subscription here. There's even CNBC commenting today about the conflict of interest that JP Morgan, again, who was described by the Department of Justice, their precious metals desk, called a criminal enterprise, publishes at 4:59 a.m. So this is before the middle of the night or early morning, Tuesday. Miners decline as JP Morgan downgrades sector and silver prices slide from the 8-year high. So to recap, and then we'll wrap up. After seeing historic demand on Friday in SLV, panic buying, and I never said that word before, but Charlotte, is it appropriate to say based on what we've heard from bullion dealers, even before you talked with me today, would you describe it as panic buying?
I would think that's a fair description.
And that escalated on Monday. Yet after all of that, between Monday and Tuesday, they wrote this article. And if you had the subscription here, they didn't mention anything about SLV. They didn't mention anything about physical demand. I saw TD Ameritrade put out a similar article. They talked about, the virality of the SilverSqueeze movement is, we think it's going down. Okay, that's a great metric. I'm going to look at what people are doing with their money. And perhaps we can wrap up there. I'll be covering this a lot more. I have the Arcadia Economics YouTube channel. I do have for people who want the background, that's why I wrote that book, The Big Silver Short. The whole point was to let as many people know before this happened. It was written so if you've never heard anything about silver and you want to get up to speed as quickly as possible, that was designed for you. It's also on audio. All can be found at arcadiaeconomics.com. And I've been doing a lot of videos as often as anything comes out that I can get on the channel on YouTube. And with that, we'll wrap up. And thanks so much again. It can be a good, just remain calm. You're prepared for this. If Charlotte, you've prepared thousands of people for this, and it is what it is, and we can be calm. It's going to be okay. For silver investors, it's going to be great, but there are risks out there. Certainly make sure your money in any investment is places where it's safe. I'm hearing a lot about margin calls, cracks in credit. So please be incredibly careful about that. And anyway, that's all for today.
Okay, well, thank you so much for stopping by to talk on this very busy day in a very busy time. Thanks for being here. And once again, I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing News Network. This is Chris Marcus with Arcadia Economics.